People searching for immortality accidentally invented guns. No chemistry. They had no concept of oxygen. No idea what pressure was. No framework for what a gas even was. The men who built the first firearms couldn't explain a single part of how their own weapon worked. So how do you invent something you can't explain? Every answer leads to another question, and it starts somewhere you'd never expect. 9th century China. Daoist alchemists, mixing sulfur, charcoal, and minerals, chasing an elixir of eternal life. What they got instead? Fire that wouldn't stop. Early texts don't celebrate the discovery. They warn people away from it. Burned hands, burned houses. By 1044, a military manual called the Wujing Zongyao was writing the formula down. Not as medicine, but as a weapon. Trial and error explains gunpowder. But it doesn't explain how a fire that burns things down becomes a weapon that launches them. 4 years, nobody used it to throw anything at all. It was ceremony, spectacle, a terrifying way to set things ablaze. Then someone asked the one question that changed everything. If this can throw sparks, could it throw something heavier? They strapped a bamboo tube to a spear. Called it a fire lance. At first, it just spat flame. Then someone dropped a pellet inside, and the gas, with nowhere else to go, carried it forward. The fire lance explains the first projectile weapon. Except it wasn't really a gun yet. It was still mostly a flamethrower that happened to spit debris. And here's the part that gets left out of most retellings. It wasn't even better than what soldiers already had. Early hand cannons were slow to load, wildly inaccurate, and for over a century, a skilled archer with a bow could outshoot one in speed, range, and accuracy. Armies kept both on the battlefield side by side, because the gun hadn't earned its reputation yet. It was terrifying. It wasn't good. So if the fire lance wasn't a real gun, and the first real guns were worse than bows, why did anyone keep building them? Because even after people learned to fire a projectile, another problem showed up. The gun itself couldn't be trusted. Picture a soldier in the 1300s handed one of the first metal-barreled guns. He has no idea what's inside it chemically. No idea what pressure means. All he knows is what he's been told. Pack the powder, light the fuse, point it away from your own body, and hope. Because if the barrel had a flaw, a bubble in the casting, a wall too thin, it didn't misfire. It exploded. In his hands, in his face. Every early gunner was running a live experiment with his own body as the test. Knowledge of gunpowder spread west from there, through Central Asia, through the Islamic world. Along trade routes, the Mongol Empire had forced open and reached Europe by the 1200s. Europe didn't just inherit gunpowder. It reinvented everything around it. And something strange happened along the way. As guns got more common, European armor got thicker. Blacksmiths were racing bullets, plate by plate, trying to outbuild the weapon. For a while, it worked. Then it stopped working. Guns got powerful enough that no armor a person could actually move in would stop them. Armies quietly gave up on plate armor altogether, not because it went out of fashion, but because the arms race had a losing side and it wasn't the gun. Better metal explains why guns won. But metal alone doesn't explain why Europe specifically pulled ahead of the empire that invented gunpowder in the first place. Here's the part almost no one talks about. A gun that doesn't explode requires serious metalworking, mining, smelting, forging, precision casting at scale. So the race to build better guns dragged entire industries forward with it. Better furnaces, better tooling. State-run foundries producing weapons by the thousand. Governments that could organize large-scale metal production could out-arm governments. that couldn't. Guns didn't just change battles. They quietly decided which nations had the industrial base to dominate the next 3 centuries. Politics and industry explain why some nations pulled ahead. But none of it explains the strangest fact of all, that every one of these advances happened centuries before anyone could explain why gunpowder exploded in the first place. Steam engines ran before thermodynamics existed to explain them. Ships crossed oceans before fluid dynamics existed to explain how. And gunpowder kept improving, generation after generation, while the actual chemistry of combustion stayed a total mystery. Craftsmen in the Middle Ages were still hand-adjusting the ratio of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur by feel. No formula, just memory of what had worked and what had killed someone. One of the biggest leaps in reliability, corned powder, pressing the mixture into damp grains instead of loose dust, came from someone trying it and watching it work better, not from understanding a single molecule of it. Modern chemistry eventually caught up and explained exactly what those craftsmen had stumbled onto by hand centuries earlier. They were right the entire time. They just couldn't have told you why. Every firearm begins with the same idea. Nature follows rules whether or not anyone understands them yet. The first gunsmiths never knew the chemistry, never knew the physics, but by paying attention to failure and surviving enough of it, they uncovered truths that science would spend the next several centuries proving they'd had right all along. We tend to celebrate the people who explain the world. But just as often, civilization was built by the people who were willing to experiment with it first and find out the hard way. It makes you wonder how many of today's technologies we're using exactly the same way, guided by experience, while the full explanation is still waiting to be discovered.